We're going to look at the circumference and area of circles. Okay, so let's first start by looking at what we can label different parts of a circle as. Okay, so whenever we have a line that connects the centre of a circle here to the external face of a circle, this line is called the radius. Okay, so this one is called the radius, and we typically label it as R. Okay, and that's just a shorter way of writing radius. Okay, now if we have a line that goes from one side of the circle, passes through the centre and touches the other side of the circle, now that is called a diameter. Okay, and then we call a diameter D for short. Okay, so the circumference of a circle is the distance from one point on the circle. So let's say we start on this point and we walk all the way around the circle and we go back to where we started. Okay, that distance that we've travelled is called the circumference. Okay, now what we can do to work out this circumference is we can use the radius and diameter to work out what distance that is. Now we can use the radius or the diameter. Okay, so it's first important to realise that the diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. Okay, so in other words, the diameter is twice the length of the radius. Okay, and that's true for all circles. Okay, so we can actually write a formula for the length of the circumference. Okay, so we're going to call the circumference C, and the formula for the length of the circumference is 2 pi r. Okay, this means you do 2 times by pi times by the radius. Okay, and this is also the same as pi d. Okay, and the reason why is because d is 2 times the radius, so we would just swap this d for 2 and the radius, okay, to give us 2 pi r. So you can express the circumference in terms of the radius or in terms of the diameter. Okay, so that's important to realise. Now let's just tidy this up and we'll do an example. So let's say, for example, our radius is 5 centimetres. Okay, so we know that diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. So that means in this example, the diameter is equal to 2 times by 5, which is 10 centimetres. Okay, so 10 centimetres. So if we're asked to find the circumference, then we will use the formula C equals 2 pi r, or we can use pi d. Okay, it doesn't matter which one we use, it should give us the same answer. Okay, but you may just be given the radius, or you may just be given the diameter. So it's probably quicker to use this one if you're given the radius, or this one if you're given the diameter. Okay, so let's use the radius. C equals 2 pi r. So 2 pi times by r, which is 5, which gives us 10 pi. Okay, so what we've done here, now this is centimetres, what we've done here is we have given our answer in terms of pi. Okay, because we've left pi as pi. Okay, so if we actually put pi into our calculator and do 10 times pi, so if we go to this screen and then if we type in on our calculator 10 times pi, and then what you will find is your calculator, if you're using a Casio, should output 10 pi. But sometimes the question doesn't say give your answer in terms of pi, it will say give your answer to 1 decimal place. Okay, and if it says give your answer to 1 decimal place, then what you will have to do is you will click this button. I'll use a different colour to make this easier to see. You'll click this button on your calculator, so it's S arrow D, and what that will do is that will convert this into a decimal, so you should end up with 31.41596, and then a few more numbers after that. Okay, so then what we would do is we would round this number to one decimal place. So we find the first decimal place and we say, well, is the digit to the right of that decimal place closer to the 4 or the 5 here? Okay, and of course the answer is the 4. So this would be 31.4 centimetres. And whenever we round, we always write what level of accuracy we've given our answer to. So one decimal place. Okay, so the answer to this one will be 31.4 centimetres. Okay, so that would be circumference is equal to 31.4 centimetres to one decimal place. Okay, now let's look at areas instead. So if we scroll down on the page here, so the area of a circle, okay, so again we can actually use the radius or the diameter to work out the area. So the formula for the area of a circle is A is equal to pi times by the radius squared. Now because we know that the radius is equal to half the diameter, then we can say radius is equal to half the diameter, okay, because 2r is equal to the diameter. So if we just get the r on its own, we divide by 2, so we end up with a half in front of the diameter. Okay, so if then what we do is we substitute in a half d pi times by the radius, which is a half times by d squared, and then what we do is we calculate this part of the equation. We say the area is equal to pi times by, now a half squared is a quarter, and d squared is just d squared. So we end up with pi times by d squared over 4. Okay, so what that means for us is that we have two expressions for the area of a circle. We can either use pi r squared or pi times d squared divided by 4. Okay, so let's say for example our radius is 5 centimetres again. We know that our diameter is twice the radius, so that's going to be 10 centimetres. Okay, because 5 times 2 is 10. So if we want to work out the area, we'll use the radius again. We'll do pi times by the radius, which is 5 squared, which is equal to 25 pi, okay, and centimetres squared, don't forget that. Now if we do the same thing as we did for the circumference, where we type this into our calculator and then click the SD button, okay, so we will end up with 25 pi, and that will give us area is equal to 78.5398 ... centimetres squared. Okay, so if we are asked to give our answer in terms of pi, we would leave it like this. But if we were asked to give it to a certain number of decimal places or significant figures, then we would have to use the SD button on our calculator to then figure out what it is as a decimal. Okay.